Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we're talking about At Eternity's Gate, which is a 2018 film. It's just come to the Mac, by Julian Schnabel. And it's about the last sort of period of Vincent van Gogh's life.
Yes.
As his brother pronounces it. Everyone in England just goes, Vincent van Gogh. Okay. But that's wrong.
Right.
Vincent van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh is played by Willem Dafoe.
Yes, who's great.
Who is great. His brother Theo is played by Rupert Friend. A priest a little later on in the film is played by Mads Mikkelsen. There's a doctor. One of the film recreates various paintings that Van Gogh did, and the doctor that appears in one of them is played by Matthew Amalric.
Yes. Who
previously appeared in The Diving Bell and the Butterfly.
Yes.
As John Doe, the main character, which was directed by Julian Schnabel. The story follows Van Gogh in his last years of life. He goes to Arles in the south of France on the advice of Paul Gauguin, and he doesn't really get along with many of the people there. They kind of find him crazy, and he drinks too much. There are a couple of people who he's kind of friends with, but essentially he is only happy when he's painting. I'd say he's only calm when he's painting, and he has these philosophies around painting that he talks about having to get a painting done as quickly as possible. A text, an intertitle right at the end of the film says that in the 80 days he spent there, he did 75 paintings, which seems like a lot.
Yes.
You know? He takes this blank book that's given to him by a woman there and fills it with drawings almost immediately. You get the impression he's just sketching and sketching and sketching, and he's kind of alive when he's in nature.
Yes. Anyway, I didn't like it. Let's get to the crux of it, really. So I thought it's a film that it's divided into 4 sections. Each begins with darkness, and you have Willem Dafoe speaking, and that introduces each sector of the film. I think in the first, sector, he says, I paint. Well, why do you paint, right? Kind of, I have to, well, why? Or something like that, right? Like, so, and I don't like the thesis that the film puts out. So ostensibly, the myth, or what we've known about Van Gogh until now, is that he shot himself, that he committed suicide. But, this new film puts out the theory that in fact he was shot. And
by 2 young boys.
By 2 young boys. And the film has, I think, a very despicable view, that everyone was against Van Gogh, and that, the ordinary peasants that he lived with were uncouth, uncomprehending savages that taunted and tortured him, which I've not seen before in any of the other treatments of Van Gogh's life, and there are so many, and which I do find actually kind of like despicable. It's a really snooty cosmopolitan view that kind of civilization only exists in centers of culture, and that everywhere else is kind of scary and brutish and thuggish. I really despise that.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. The film also doesn't have the most positive attitude towards the city, though, either, because it's certainly on Van Gogh's side the whole way through, and Van Gogh is someone who doesn't get along with the city. He needs to be in nature.
But I think Gauguin's whole discussion is about the city. So I think what we see in the city is the art establishment, and the art establishment is seen as despicable as well. So on the one hand, the art establishment is despicable, and then small town provincials are seen as brutish and thuggish and incomprehending. That only really leaves his brother, and the family and Gauguin, right? Those are kind of the only...
And just his own mind, his interior self. There's all this talk about the way I see the world and the vision I can bring to people. And which I don't think, none of that I think comes across as self-important on the side of Vincent van Gogh. I think he's quite a sympathetically rendered character, but I can see what you mean about the world that is built around him is entirely unsympathetic.
It's a very narrow view of the world, and it's with a very inflated sense of the artist's role in it, and the role of art, and also with no concessions to the spectator. Like, so some images and so on were very beautiful, and I thought, this would be great in an installation, but in a 2-hour movie where half of the screen is blurred throughout, right, where it's a mobile camera with no suspension that's just wobbling and wobbling and wobbling and wobbling. The combination of the camera constantly wobbling, and actually, that third of the bottom of the screen that was always out of focus.
Well, not always, but a lot of it. There are lots of
most of the time.
No, not most of the time either, but there are significant portions of the film, I think, particularly when you're supposed to be seeing things from literally Van Gogh's POV.
Yeah, no. But I think
it's like a split diopter or just a digitally added effect where the bottom half of the screen is blurred out, like you're looking through tears.
Yes.
And I didn't like that either.
I hated that. And then the bloody fucking lens flare. So the combination of the camera constantly wobbling, the third of the screen, of the bottom of the screen being blurred, and the lens flare, I just thought, like, come on. Like, have pity on the fucking audience.
Dropping the colour out at one point for some reason to emphasise the texture of the painting, I guess. Or dropping the sound out. I didn't like the use of music either. There's this really dull, annoying, plinky-plonky piano music that comes in and then just stops.
Yes.
And it's just abrupt, and you don't feel the purpose to it. I did like some of the camera work. Forgetting the effects that were kind of applied to it, the blurring and the lens flare and all that sort of stuff. I did like some of the camera work. Very early on, it's incredibly shaky, and you're actually there's that one conversation between Gauguin and Van Gogh in Paris, and the camera's getting right up into their faces and it's moving around, and it's actually primarily done in a long take. Yes. Where the camera's constantly moving and kind of intruding on them, and I thought, this is kind of it's obviously it's incredibly noticeable and almost distracting, but there was a texture that it was bringing out that I thought was quite interesting. And then when it calms down, which it does, when he starts painting his boots, I thought, this is kind of interesting, and I know what you mean about the shaky cam, but I do think it calmed down. There are really nicely composed or nicely captured things. I think some of the stuff in the first third of the film where he's first in Arles and he's exploring the countryside and he's painting and he's happy and it's sunny and the light is incredible.
Yes,
and
there
the
are beautiful images,
and there are some really nicely composed images.
There are, but I think as a movie it sucks. Yeah. I think it really kind of makes no concession to a spectator, and to someone being in a cinema for 2 hours with this thing juggling in front of your eyes. I mean, I thought it was just pitiless. And even that moment that you're describing, I think it's so contrary to the feel, or I mean, I remember reading this thing about Jameson, and making a comparison between the shoes that Van Gogh painted, which evoke like poverty and the earth and people struggling, and kind of it evokes a whole way of life, which is kind of poor people in rural areas and kind of toiling the soil and things like that. And in comparison to Andy Warhol's kind of shoes, right? And actually, when he's painting that, you get no sense of that it's evoking a way of life. So you're shown that he's poor and he takes his socks off and so on, but the film has no sense of texture or relationships or any kind of sympathy for the people who have that way of life that he enjoys for so long. I mean, he chooses to be there and he chooses to be with those people in that place, and I think kind of to make them so unsympathetic really bothered me.
Yeah, I mean, it's the film that renders them unsympathetic, because I don't think at any point you get the feeling that Van Gogh considers them unsympathetic. He wants to be there. And he's kind of misunderstood by them, really. He has these problems.
Yes.
And they kind of get tired of him. The thing you mentioned about why he paints the boots and that kind of thing, I do get. I mean, he does seem to just paint them just because they're there.
Yes.
That's the way it's portrayed in the film. But also, the use of the camera in that scene, this is what I was talking about, the shaky cam calming down at that point. That when he gets into that room for the first time, it's crazy. The wind's going, and the camera's moving around, and it's incredibly shaky and close up and moving. And you kind of feel like if you just watched what was happening on a tripod, like, nothing's really happening. He's just sitting there. It's the camera movement that is conveying this...
his
unhappiness, turmoil, inner states. And then when he starts painting, it calms down immediately.
I get that, but
so
to me that's all paced wrong. Because, you do have to consider the audience, right? So kind of, a better filmmaker, would have measured those things and would have paced them, right? And would have timed them. They would have had kind of a rhythm and a rationale, right? So that, kind of those moments of internal turmoil, which are kind of externalized through that wobbly camera, would communicate something, and then kind of you return to a different view or to an objective view. But this is kind of almost all kind of, a subjective experience, and it's kind of very unpleasant to watch.
I kind of know what you mean, but I do disagree. I don't think it's nearly as unpleasant to watch as you're suggesting.
Well, what's for me?
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, that's the difference in point of view.
Yes.
I didn't find that. I do think it's doing it's basically a film school thing it's doing at the start, where it's like, let's make this as shaky as possible and put the camera right up close because we can.
Okay.
But I do think that once that painting begins, it really does calm down. And although the camera remains mobile almost throughout, I mean, there's that conversation scene between him and the one doctor where it is tripod mounted, but for the most part, it is always being kind of shoulder mounted, this camera. But it's never that shaky again.
Well,
I don't think it's ever emphasising that shakiness again, really.
Well,
there's that one conversation between him and Teo on the bed where it's actually moving very smoothly and subtly, even though it is still getting quite expressively kind of close up to faces and pulling back out again.
Yeah. Well, those moments were better, So, I mean, yeah, it's probably true that it's not as wobbly ever in the film again since the beginning, but it is also continues to be wobbly. Mm. Like, it is kind of, there's no steady cam, there's no steady in the mobile cam, and it's just kind of very wearing to watch. Or I found it so. And then when you add, that like a third of the bottom of the frame is blurry, like...
That was beyond me.
I mean, that's all part of what you're saying. It's a subjective state, and he's not seeing things clearly, and so on and so forth. But come on, like, you find a better way of expressing that. I mean, you said at the beginning that was very film schooly. I thought the whole film was very film schooly.
Yeah, I agree with that overall. I think it is. I think there are moments of incredible visual beauty in it.
There are.
And I think some of that stuff in the first third half of the film is actually worth seeing on its own. Like forget everything else. Those images, some of them are really worth seeing on their own terms. That image of the tree with all the yellow petals in autumn.
Yes,
unbelievable to look at. Some of these things.
There are very pretty images, and there's the one where he's going on the cart, and the sky has a particular blue. I even like the moment that you don't, which goes into black and white. Because
I kind of liked it, but
that's a moment where you see what's in his head, and that actually, in black and white, the paintings in the canvas, the trees in the canvas resemble the trees,
Yeah, because that's the point where Gauguin has decried his painting, Van Gogh painting, saying you put so much paint on the canvas, it's practically sculpture, what you're doing. And then cut to, he's out in nature painting these trees, and he's applying loads and loads of paint to the canvas. It goes to black and white, and you really get the sense with the colour gone. It really highlights the dimensionality, the third dimensionality of the painting. Yeah, and I think it's kind of incredible.
It looks, very much true to nature. So you can see the idea behind all of that stuff, but it also feels like I said, had it been a 10-minute installation that you could walk through at your own pace or whatever, fine, right? But I think kind of as a movie, I didn't like it. And actually, it kind of, so much about it annoyed me. So I do think that its view of people, is despicable. It is very much a metropolitan elite, to use that term, view of, rural people. It despises them. The film despises them, which is absolutely objectionable. So I hated that about it. And I also hated the fact that because, he is who he is in the art world, he's got the cast that he's got, So, I mean, it's an amazing cast.
Oh, Schnabel, you mean, because of his position?
Yes. Yeah. So you have kind of, Mackelson and
Oscar
Isaac and Aurillac and Emmanuel Signa, whatever her name is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an amazing all-star cast, really, And actually, obviously, in a sense, that's to be welcome, but kind of, that those people are in this kind of project because of who he is in the art world, really. So
there's something very film schooly as well about the way that Willem Dafoe acts. Although I think he's really, really good.
He's great. I think actually this is it's the best I've seen him in. He's transparent, really, and he's got no ego, and he really resembles Van Gogh.
Yeah, he really does. There are points where it's that shot I mentioned where he's talking to the doctor, and it's on a tripod for once, and he's looking straight down the barrel. And he's just cut his ear off.
Yes.
And you see the bandage and the hat. And it's identical to that image.
Yes,
that famous self-portrait. There are moments like that. But there is that one point, it's fairly early on in Arles, where he's running around a field and he lies on the ground and crumbles dirt into his face. And I'm like, just cut your ear off already. And then the film cops out after cutting his ear off. It cuts to black and says, and then I cut my ear off.
Yeah,
and then wake up and he's got a bandage. That really wound me up. That's why I was there.
I felt it was torture. Actually, I kept looking at my watch every 15 minutes.
I noticed that. Yeah.
So
we discussed just before it started that we both really, really liked Diving Bell and the Butterfly.
Yes.
Which is a previous Schnabel film where it has some kind of visual similarities. It has a very shaky camera because it's all done, or apart from flashbacks in it, it's all done as a point of view of this real guy, Jean-Dominique Bauby, who was a magazine editor, who he got in an accident and suffered from locked-in syndrome, where he could only move his eyes and I think blink. That was it. And so he had to learn to communicate with a board that people would read out letters from him and blink. And so you see the whole thing from his perspective. Blinking is done really slowly, and the whole screen goes to black, and things are constantly coming in and out of focus and things. It was an amazing experience. It was a really visceral experience, I think, to watch. And I think I haven't seen it since it was at the cinema maybe 10 years ago, but I think that film was kind of a masterpiece.
Yes. I remember thinking so as well, though, now it's been a while since I've seen it. He also did Before Night Falls. So he's obviously very good with actors. I mean, he does get amazing performances from them.
But the other thing was, while we agreed that we really liked Diving Bell and the Butterfly, we also said there's like a 70% plus chance that this film's going to be rubbish.
Yes.
And I think we just kind of both share a prejudice to some degree that Julian Schnabel is someone who thinks a lot of himself and isn't really a filmmaker.
Yes, that would be my view.
Despite the fact he's made at least one very good film in the past.
Well, I think all of his films are interesting. Like Before Night Falls is interesting, but I also think they're very difficult to like, And this one, I really do think it's almost verging on offensive. I mean, who are you doing this for? Who do you think is your audience? And who do you think you are? Really, I think no audience is going to sit through that kind of crap. I think it's offensive. It's, you know, it's kind of given no thought whatsoever to communicate something. This is, you know, and it's a very elitist view. This is what I'm an artist. Yeah, this is what I'm thinking, and it's like your job to like read me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, so there's no aspect of communication. It's like, you know, I express, you know, and it's up to you to like, you know, figure it out, right? I mean, I think,
but also, I mean, the film actually is it doesn't communicate nearly enough, kind of visually.
no,
It illustrates visually what's going on, and
Yes.
some of that can be beautiful and interesting. But when it comes to ideas, personalities, philosophies, all that sort of thing, it's all done through dialogue, and very clunky dialogue at that.
It's very
People just
banal.
say exactly what they mean
Yeah.
and express things that aren't that interesting.
yeah, and I mean the whole theory of art and so on is banal in the extreme, you know. So I have
yeah,
a gift
I mean-
from God, you know, but nobody appreciates me because I was born too early. Of like, fuck off.
Yeah, no, that's literally. I mean, you are supposed to come to this film basically going, Vincent van Gogh is the most amazing painter there's ever been, and you come to it with the knowledge that he wasn't appreciated in his own lifetime, and he had these issues, and it was only, you know, he never sold a painting in his lifetime, and it was only afterwards that Sunflowers went for 125 million or whatever, and you know, he became the posthumously the greatest artist ever, sort of thing. You kind of come to it with all of that. And the film just goes, yes, let's confirm it.
Yeah.
And let's
Well,
not- let's
actually,
not do-
no. It's because what it's offering, I think, is an alternate thesis, and it's partly why I find the film so despicable. Because basically, what the film is saying is, okay, here's this fragile man, you know, who is obsessed with his work and so on, but really, it's like kind of, you know, it's the art world and these peasants that really killed him, right? Kind of. It's these children who threw rocks at him, you know, and the school teacher who kind of brought their children to destroy his paintings, and, you know, then these young lads in the village who basically shoot him because, you know, they despise him, and, you know, they accuse him of rape and murder, and, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
kind of, frankly, and all the other versions, I mean, it's kind
It's
of
like the same as what you've heard, except much worse.
well,
Not only was he not appreciated, he was actively hated and loathed.
and shot by these people, right?
And the priest takes the piss out of his painting.
Yes.
You know,
So,
the priest who's supposed to be there to help him.
well, I mean, kind
Everyone's
of,
a critic.
you know, I don't mind that. But actually, you know, it's very interesting that the priest is one of the more sympathetic figures in the film. You know, the peasants are all scoundrels, you know, and kind of the priest is, you know, someone who speaks his language. Again, a kind of, you know, it's pretty. I think it's the despicable view. So,
Is it the best film about Vincent van Gogh you've seen recently?
No, it's not. So
You preferred the
I prefer the Minnelli. You know, kind of. At least Minnelli offers a worldview and feelings, you know, kind of very vividly, operatically expressed by Kirk Douglas, you know, and visually. You know, and Anthony Quinn is Gauguin. And the film is a visual marvel, you know, so I don't care, you know, who Julian Schnabel thinks he is, kind of, any of those images in the Minnelli film kind of crap all over this one.
I was thinking of the animated one.
Oh, I hated that. I mean, I thought that was a one-trick kind of
Yes.
pony, really.
What was it called?
It's the one where, like, the paintings come alive.
Yeah. What was it? What was it called?
I think it's on Netflix. Put Van Gogh films.
I am. I mean, there's so bloody many of them. Like, he is the most popular painter ever. Loving Vincent. That's
Loving
what it was
Vincent.
called. Loving Vincent.
Yes,
yeah.
I didn't.
I couldn't get through it. Yeah.
Well, I was a prisoner in the cinema, so I did get through it. But,
Prisoner in cinema. Could have left.
well, not really. It involves kind of getting too many people to stand up.
Oh, was it a full cinema?
It was a full row at the Electric.
Yeah.
So you really feel kind of, you know, constrained.
Like you had locked-in syndrome.
Yes. So anyway,
You
let's
only scream with your eyes.
let's wrap this up. We can only kind of
Yeah.
shit on a film for
It's
so
basically
long.
not that impressive a film.
Yes.
Yeah. Really. But you know, it looked very beautiful on the Mac screen, so that's a plus. Yeah, we saw it at the Mac, and on that on that beautiful screen, when it was at its visual best, it sang.
I think it's worth seeing because Willem Dafoe is so great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he really is. It's the best performance I've seen him give, and it's kind of his warmest, and also his most spared down. Because I thought, oh my God, kind of, if you think of what Kirk Douglas and how operatic like his performance is, in the Manelli film, what's Willem Dafoe going to do, right? And actually, it was a very pared down kind of performance. It was he was great.
It's kind of it's lived in and it feels authentic. And
yes,
it's a really good performance. Initially, when I was getting into the swing of things, as I say, I found it kind of film school. I thought, oh, I miss the Green Goblin, but as the film develops and in the context of everything else around him, he is obviously the most sympathetic character going.
But the reason why Dafoe is great is because actually he's asked to express quite a variety of emotion, and he does so very openly, very simply. You really understand what he's conveying at each point, and actually also the sense of kind of loneliness, of being misunderstood, the awkwardness of the past. I mean, he's got a whole series of moments that are just kind of really beautiful,
And vulnerability.
Yes.
Like when Gauguin leaves.
Yes.
It's very tender.
Or the scene in the hospital with the brother and, things like that. I mean, he's just great.
Yeah.
He
needs people.
A kind of a really pretentious film, with a horrible view of people, that nonetheless offers a context for a truly great performance by Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, fair enough.
Bye. So we are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Cheerio.